The 2026 Year of Quilts calendar from Studio 180 Design. Each month, Studio 180 Design has highlighted one of their most popular patterns, and I am challenging myself to do a little bit each month. We're in August. The pattern is called Coral Reef. The Coral Reef pattern uses the Wedge Star and the Tucker trimmer. The Wedge Star tool is one of these large plastic acrylic tools, and it will make 22 different sizes of blocks. The tools come with instructions. We can do a 3-inch block all the way up to a 24-inch block. Has large instruction sheet. I prefer to print up the PDF download from the website. And this tool is just going to be a little too big because I only want to make 3-inch blocks. Although I can make 3-inch blocks, this is just going to get in the way. So I have the new petite size Wedge Star, which will do from 2 blocks up to 2-inch blocks up to 12-inch blocks. So I'm going to do the 3-inch block, and this is going to be a little more manageable to handle. I'm really liking the instructions they've included this time. Nice little booklet. But then again, I like to print up the PDF from the website, studio180design.net, to their free downloads. And I found this one and I printed it up. Now, I've looked at my block that I want to do. This is the block that I want to do. But I got some cool fabric, and where it says medium, I think I'm going to swap that around and use it as my dark. So I have my light for my background. This I'm going to use where the dark is showing on the pattern. And then this one is going to be where the block, look at all of that. Look at that texture in there. Oh, I can't wait. I'm going to be using it where the medium. So I've gone through and I've pulled out my measurements and I have written down my diamond strips. I need to do light and dark. So that's going to be those little diamonds in here, right there and right there. So I will do my light and my dark. My small wedge, which is these little triangles right on the ends there, I'm going to do medium and dark, so these 2 fabrics. And then my corner out there will be my light. I'm kind of running out of my light fabric, my background, so I'm trying to play it a little carefully so that I don't have too many issues with running out of fabric later on. Let me cut my strips and we'll get started. I want to cut my diamonds. So my diamonds are my diamond strip, which is 1 1/4 inch wide, and I've got 1 strip of each. And I am going to line up the edge of my ruler or this solid line. It doesn't matter. That's a 1/4 inch difference. It's easier to see that solid line. I'm going to line that up with the edge of my fabric. I'm going to place my first choice ruler right beside it, move away, and I'm going to cut some strips. So I am cutting 1 1/4 inch units, lining it up. There we go, 1 1/4, and I'm going to cut. Now for each block that I'm making, I will need 4. So let's just count out our blocks that we're doing. So that's 1, 2, 1 1/4, 3, and 4. And I will continue to cut that in a minute. I want to cut left-handed. So I'm going to take my pairs again, stack them up, This time I'm going to rotate my tool and line up that solid line on the edge of my fabric, line up my first choice ruler, slide away my wedge star tool and trim. That's garbage. So let's do 1 1/4 inch cuts. 1. Now I often find that 4 is my limit. When I've done 4 cuts, I want to make sure that I still have that correct angle. So I will go back and I will check my angle before I cut some more. So there's 4. Let's line this up again. Bring it into the middle. Line that up. Yeah, we're off just a hint. So we will trim that up just a little bit. And then, whoops, we will continue cutting these. Now we're going to cut the small wedges, and those were our 2-inch strips. And I'm just going to take a single layer of both. And I am going to start off with right-handed cutting. And what we're going to do is we are going to be cutting using the wedge tool. Now I want to show you, right at the very, very tip here is a little line. That little line goes to the top edge of our fabric, and then our 2-inch will come to the bottom. So we'll slide over here, and I'm going to cut. Whoops, that was left-handed. Let me do right-handed. So there are 2 little wedge stars. I'm going to rotate my tool, line that little mark up again, and my 2 line. And cut. And rotate and cut. Now, if I was doing left-handed cutting, let's just switch that around. For left-handed cutting, we'll go over here. This time, I'm going to start off on the right-hand side, and I would trim this off and then cut. And then rotate, trim this off, and rotate, one more, and rotate. I've laid out all my units just to make sure I'm happy with my fabric choices, and I think that'll be okay. These little, the strip will be my corner squares that will go on the outside, and I'll be using very, very little fabric. Let's start sewing these together. Now to sew these together, I have my plan in place. My dark will be joined with 2 medium, and my light will be joined with 2 dark. So that's my plan. Now what I have to do is make sure that I sew everything together properly. I like to have my units laid out this way. To sew my units together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from the center to the left, take my diamond and match up my tips, my points, and then I'm going to sew, and I'm going to do that to all of them just on the right hand side. So this one will go like this, And I'm going to sew all of those. So we want to reduce the bulk down here. So we're going to trim off just that little bit of extra fabric right there. And then we're going to stitch our other triangle on the other side, onto the right side. So we're going to match up down there. The nice thing is we know that this is oversized. So we will be trimming it down a little bit more so it's not that critical that everything matches up, but we are going to sew with our diamond on top. I've sewn my triangles to the left-hand side of my diamonds, and I have pressed the seam allowances to the triangle. So if we look at the back of both of them, those seam allowances are both going the same direction. Now it's time to trim these units. Remember, we're doing 3-inch units. So what I'm looking for, and I'll just show you here, I'm looking for a 3 dotted line. So that line there, that's going to be my seam line. So let me line it up. My seam line lines up perfectly, and then I can cut. Whoops. Sorry, I need to get some Invisigrip on the back of this ruler, and it's sliding a little bit for me. So I will go get some in a minute. Now, one of the things that I was taught a long time ago is rather than starting my cutting right at the edge, come in about 1/2 inch, back up, and then cut. Come in about 1/2 inch, back up, and then cut. Because now I haven't pushed that seam or that corner away. So let's try that again. We're going to line up our stitching line right on that 3. We're going to cut this way, and then we're going to start about 1/2 inch in. We're going to back up and then continue. And there are my diamond units. I'm going to start sewing those together again because my seam allowances are nesting. I'm going to have a beautiful point, seam and point. I've sewn and pressed my seam allowances open. And now what I want to do is I want to trim. So what I'm going to use my tucker trimmer, and I'm going to line up that diagonal. I'm not going to measure anything. I just want to square up this unit. So sometimes it may just be whiskers, and sometimes there may be more. So I didn't trim off a lot, but I know I now have a nice clear 90-degree angle. Let's do that left-handed. This is one of the advantages of starching my fabrics well, because now I can make sure that these corners are perfectly square. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew these two together. Again, I'm going to be nesting seam allowances, and I will probably put a pin in right at the top there to hold those together. Let's sew. My 2 halves are sewn, and my seam allowances are pressed open. And now it's time to sew the center. So I'm going to pick up, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the Lemoyne Star, is I'm going to find that little seam intersection. And if the pin goes through nice and easy, then I know I'm in the right spot. And right here. And that's just going to hold it. I'm going to pin my nesting seams. Nest them up nice. And then I'm going to take 2 really, really fine pins that are straight. There we go. And I'm going to pinch that seam with my thumb and finger, and I'm going to slide that pin in, and I'm going to slide that pin in and take out my center one. And like I did with the Lemoyne Star, I'm going to sew from this side because I know the front is pretty well matching, but I want to make sure the back, and I'm stitching right through that seam intersection. Let's sew. I've sewn and pressed my seam on my wedge star. I have cut squares from my corner strip. I need 2 squares. I've cut them in half, or cut them in half diagonally, and I have decided that I'm going to be putting them on my dark unit. So I need to trim. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my back end, or my flat edge of my wedge star, and I'm going to line that little intersection. There's a little intersection right there. I'm going to line that up right on that seam intersection. Now, I've got these lines here, which should help me because they should be extending down to these seam lines. There we go. Let's do that again on the next one. Line up my flat edge intersection and extend those lines into my seams that are here. And trim. And we'll do the other side. And trim. And one more. And trim. Let's do it left-handed, just to show you. There we go. Pointing off to the left. Line up. My seam lines are lined up on these diamond seams. And trim. So now I'm going to sew these onto there. I've sewn my corner triangles onto my block, and now I need to trim. So I'm going to be using the 3.5 inch line through the center, and I'm going to be lining up this point and this point. This point right here, and this point right here, and this point and this point. So I'm going to find the 3.5 marking for the center, and then just rotate my tool until everything is lined up square. I'm cutting left-handed first, sorry. And rotate. And I can use my 3-inch dotted line here to help me, and I want to make sure. Now, normally we would have a diagonal seam going this way, and we'd be lining up on the diagonal seam. We do not have that this time, but we have a perfect 3.5 inch cut block. Well, there you have it. My July Lemoyne Star, the gold stars, and then my nice pinky orange wedge star blocks from August. I think that border looks amazing. I may have to do something with that idea. September, that was July and August. September is the pattern's called Tsunami. And I got some ideas on how I'm going to work that really fantastic border. And I'm going to be using the pint-size wing clipper because it's nice and small, and I can get some small units. In the meantime, happy quilting.